Ooh, looks like we got a Benchmade in the house. And it looks like it visited Mr. Edge Pro. Stay tuned, guys. We'll take a look at it. Hi gang, Rob here. It's the evening of 7 August 2014, and yes, we do have a guest in the house. It is the Benchmade Model 300 ball axis flipper. Designed by custom knife maker Butch Ball, and opposite the Benchmade butterfly logo, we have Mr. Ball's Crossed Knives custom maker logo. Interesting little knife. Little chunky knife, by the way, that frankly I have not been enamored with to the point of desiring to purchase one, for reasons I'll get into during the review. But those are matters of taste, and they're rather subjective. All in all, we have a very solid, well-made offering from Benchmade with familiar materials, familiar pivot suspension, and a familiar lock. What could go wrong? Wait, this isn't familiar. What is it, a sharp? No, it's a flipper. An axis flipper. Interesting. Well, let's first go over what this thing's made of, how big it is, the normal stuff. First, we'll talk about the blade. It is 3.1 inches long, fashioned of 154 cm steel, one of my absolute favorites, as you guys well know, with Benchmade's sort of signature finish. Kind of satin on the flats, kind of stonewashed on the main bevel. Love how they do that. It's sort of a satin wash. And a very durable finish, by the way. Blade style I would call a modified drop point with a whole lot of sweep. It is about 3.5 millimeters thick, pretty chunky. Comes to a pretty darn nice thin profile behind the cutting edge though. Saber ground flat from about 3/4 of the breadth of the blade. That's plenty gradual for good slicing action. The handle length is 4.3 inches, which gives us an overall length of 7.4. Handle is 5/8 of an inch thick, about 625 thousandths. Pretty chunky for an EDC blade. And speaking of chunky, even with its milled stainless steel liners, still weighs in at a robust 4.8 ounces, quite a bit for a 3.1 inch bladed would-be utility or EDC knife. The handle material on this guy is 3D Machine G10, sort of a modified Anso pattern, but instead of having sharp peaks in between the radius cuts, we just have flat. That's just familiar peel ply G10. deployment is via flipper, which is an interesting thing, the flipper, or standard Benchmade thumb studs, and the flipper kind of gets in the way. The lock is the vaunted Axis lock. Super strong, super fun, super reliable until your little tiny Omega springs break, which I find happens far more often anecdotally in forums than it ever does in reality. I've never had one break. I know they do. I've seen pictures. You don't need to comment, guys. Suspension on the pivot is via phosphor bronze washers as usual for an Axis lock Benchmade. Okay, and the clip is a deep carry fold over style pocket clip, and it is tip up ambidextrous, as all pocket clips should be. Don't leave us lefties out, you knife makers. Please don't. Okay, what do I like about this knife? There are a few things. I love the blade shape, although just in my eye it looks a little out of proportion with the handle. It looks a little stubby. But I wonder, don't you? If I didn't have the flipper, isn't that something? Look. Stubby blade, bad handle, the blade to handle ratio. Oh, look, the blade just got longer. Isn't that interesting? I think it is. It's an optical illusion. The flipper is not pretty. It's not pretty when the knife is open, and it's not pretty when the knife is closed. Just makes that package pretty broad, doesn't it? I'm going to talk about this while I'm talking about it. This is one of those knives that, frankly, I just don't get in some ways. You've got a Benchmade Axis lock knife. Flies out with thumb studs if the flipper doesn't hit your index finger. Super free action. Why you need to complicate things by putting a flipper on a knife with no detent, I don't know, because I mean that's sort of contrary to most flipper thinking, isn't it? You guys know, if you've handled Axis lock knives, there's no detent. The retention is via the Omega springs and the cam action of the blade tang. And how you can see how it moves the Axis lock bar. Well, that sort of soft retention means to get good flipping action, you got to build a lot of tension, and then sometimes you got to really build tension and change directions fast, unless you're going to go a lot of wrist. Anything will flip with wrist. I sort of contend that Benchmade felt mucho market pressure to have a flipper. And although they knew that it really didn't work very well with the Axis lock mechanism, they put it in an Axis lock platform anyway. They could have used a frame lock like the Mini Pocket Rocket, some of the Siebert designed knives that they have, frame locks with detents. I just don't see that it works really well in this platform, but Benchmade has a flipper. And everybody knows you can't be a knife manufacturer in 2014 if you don't make a knife with a flipper. Even though you've got one of the smoothest, sweetest, fastest manual deploying mechanisms in the history of the world, you still got to have a flipper. Okay, so it's got a flipper. If I forgot to mention it, the Ball Axis flipper has a flipper. Okay. All right. I'm done beating that horse, okay? Let's talk about the rest of the knife. Forget that it even has the flipper, which does provide some kind of a finger guarding function with the knife. You know, this modified drop point almost looks like a clip point. I think you could, I don't know, one of those two with lots of sweep. Let's talk about the rest of the package. Ergonomics. It's a very hand-filling little knife, and it's very solid. You have barely adequate jimping, just a little run of what? 3 cuts on the spine of the knife, but it is on sort of a ramp, and it does grab the skin. You're not going forward. And the addition of the jimping on the flipper / finger guard give you a really good purchase on the knife. I have a large size hand, and if I follow the finger grooves, it leaves my pinky on the little flat on the back, which I am totally fine with. Don't mind that a bit on lots of knives. But actually, my hand wants to be farther forward, which kind of puts me out of the grooves. Don't know if I love them or not. Don't hate them. So that's a pretty comfortable grip. The hammer grip, not very comfortable at all. That curvature inside the handle really wants to jam things up. Forces the side of my index finger into that jimping on the flipper. Not a great hammer grip knife. Yeah, it's not very comfortable. If we go to the draw cut grip, again, we got issues with the flipper digging into the web of my hand. If we go to the reverse grip, the handle just seems a little short in that grip, but actually not uncomfortable, and I don't get any uncomfortable kind of hot spot from the flipper. In this grip, the blade's a little short to be using that grip in any kind of tactical fashion. Purchase on the knife is good. Ergonomics aren't great. Clip is, well, it's standard fare for this clip. It's just not very strong. I'm not a huge fan, guys, of these fold-over type clips. Not only do they not seem to provide a lot of retention, if you try to adjust the tension on them, they tend to snap right here in this bend. It's just a little too tight for a piece of springy stainless steel. But it does ride deeply in the pocket, and this little cutout makes it nice to extract. It just sort of grabs your finger, you get your index finger in there and your thumb on that grippy G10, and out it comes. You can't really fault this knife at all in material quality and execution. The mechanism, the materials, all great. Aesthetically, it just doesn't do it for me. And ergonomically, I just think it'd be better off without this. Which is kind of an interesting flipper as well, isn't it? Hard to see, but there's a big old slot cut in that flipper where it rides around and engages the axis lock bar as a closed stop pin, and then the open stop pin in the normal spot catches the back of the blade. I don't know if it cuts either. Let's see. Always a good idea to make sure the knife cuts. This one, by the way, courtesy of a new sharpening customer, Jack. Yeah, it cuts about like 154 cm. That dog will hunt. And Jack takes very good care of his knives. He sent me like, I don't know, 6 of them to sharpen or some ridiculous thing. And he's got some nice ones. A couple of fixed blade bone collectors, a ZT560, a ZT0770, Paramilitary 2 he sent me, a couple others. Oh, and also, this is so cool. He sent me this big pile of sharpening, and then he had this old Marbles Hunter Skinner, you know, with the funny shaped blade, the old total function over form blade shape they made. And It was one, I think he said he dropped out of a tree stand. It sat in the snow for a while, and it's got all kinds of crazy patina on it, and it's just an awesome old knife. He just threw that in and gave it to me. How cool is that? Keep your eyes open for that one on the channel, guys. So here's my conclusion of the Benchmade 300 ball axis flipper. Mechanically, functionally, build quality wise, an excellent offering from Benchmade. From a features and aesthetic standpoint, it just doesn't quite do it for me, but it probably will for you. Priced about, I think, where you would expect it to be, $140 to $150 as of August 2014 on most of your finer cutlery websites. Totally worth it for what it is. A little bit less than a Benchmade 940, a little more than a 710. Kind of right in there. I think the 710 is a little underpriced for what it is, just because of how long it's been around. All the tooling's probably paid for, and this is a relatively new offering. If it sticks around, it'll probably settle in the 125 range as it grows old, right where the 710 is. Just thought you'd like to see it and hear my take on it. Some of you like to hear my take on knives. Give you one last sort of slow pan. Look at that blade centering, pretty good for an axis lock Benchmade. Just a really well made piece. They offer this now in blue and black G10 as well. Plain edge and serrated. It's a good sign when a knife comes out and then has variations in the coming years. That means it's going to be in the Benchmade stable for a while. Well, that's all for that one, my friends. Pretty cool, pretty cool. You guys have a great night. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the word is sharp.